Hello again, hope everyone's doing really well. Today's video is going to be about pricing and valuations on cards, and it's connected to my previous video where I put out the question, how long is too long to wait if the cards aren't coming to you at the right price? And from that, I had a really good conversation with Tom Butters from the Butters Collection on Instagram. And he said, if the Lance Franklin draft pick at the moment is $450 and you think it's going to hit $1,000 in the future, like you've said in previous videos, then what's the problem with buying it at $450? And I think this was a great question because it's very natural to think it's $450 now, I think it's going to be $1,000 in the future, therefore it's a great buy. But it got me thinking about how I value cards and the different considerations that go along with it, because you really have to look at your purchase with perspective on what the card is priced now, what kind of growth rate you're looking for, and what it needs to be in the future to get that kind of growth rate year on year. And sometimes the outcome is really surprising and it gives you perspective and it sheds some new light on the purchase as well. This actually might be a tad expensive at the moment, even when it might seem like a good deal. So I'm going to jump into my example now. Okay, so I'm going to get into an example of what I see as overpaying for cards. So we're going to use the $450 for the Lance Franklin draft pick signature that I mentioned in the last video. Personally, when I'm buying cards, when I'm putting money into footy cards, I want to see some kind of rate of return. I know everyone's not like that, but for me, even if I really like the cards and I want them in my collection, I still don't want to lose any money. And honestly, I want to make about 5 to 10% a year. That's my goal when I invest or collect footy cards. So let's look at a few different scenarios. Firstly, we've got this $450 growing at a rate of 5% a year, 1.05, and let's look at this over many years. So the years are up top in this top column. Let's go up to 15, get a few more and drag this formula. So this is showing what you would need to sell the card for in 15 years time to recoup your initial investment with a growth rate of 5% a year. So you'd have to sell it for $935 in 15 years. Now I'm just going to repeat that with 8% and 10% as well. So this is the 5% row, this is the 8% row, and this is the 10% row. So this might depend on your risk tolerance or how much you're looking to gain each year. Usually for footy cards, I'd be looking towards more this 10%, just because with stocks and other more safe assets, you can almost guarantee this 5 to 8% over a long time. So if you're getting into something a bit more risky, generally I'd be looking towards this 10% marker. So like I said, for the top one, this is the amount you'd need to sell it for in 15 years to recoup this with your chosen rate of return. So this is an exercise I might do when I'm looking at buying any big card, and it's just kind of a reasonability test. Like, is it reasonable that the Lance Franklin card will be $1,900 in 15 years time? And I don't think that's out of the realms of possibility, but it is a lot of growth in that time, and that makes me a bit queasy buying it at that $450 price point. So a big thing here is time. Now, me personally, and as I said to Tom when we were talking about it, I think this card will definitely hit $1,000 in the future. But the big question is, when is it going to hit $1,000? And that's something that no one knows. No one knows whether it will at all, but if it does, no one knows when that will happen. So for me, when I map this out, I just want to make sure it's enough time in the future to make me feel confident that it actually will be that price by then. And at $450, it hits that $1,000 mark in year 9, so it'd be pretty much around 2030, 2031. Personally, do I think this is going to happen? It's possible, but I'm not super confident on that. But say we change the number to $300, which is what I'd be comfortable paying at the moment, then look how this changes the calculation. So now it takes until year 13 to get to that $1,000 price point, which is 2035. And I'd say that's very likely to happen at this point, and that would make me comfortable in buying this card. So when I'm talking about overpaying, I'm not talking about overpaying as in the amount I buy it for now. Say if I buy it for $450, I'm very confident it's going to increase in value into the future. But my question is it going to increase enough to keep up with the growth rate I'm happy with, that 5, 8, or 10%? And if I think it's not going to keep up with that growth rate, well, I should probably be putting it into stocks or saving up for a house or that kind of thing. Because I've already got a lot of cards in my collection I want, and I really don't want to just be buying cards willy-nilly just for the sake of it, rather than being good buys and smart buys for the future. So let's just get into a few more examples using this same model. And I think this is once again a good way of thinking about newer cards and the limits on their growth in the future. So let's take the Brilliance release and say the Crips is selling for about $1,000 or $1,100. Let's just say $1,100 the Crips is selling for right now, the Crips Gold, that is. And let's see what you'd have to get back in 15 years to recoup that initial investment with 5, 8, and 10% growth. So as you can see, with 10%, it's a huge amount, and that's never going to happen in my eyes. That's just out of the question. These two are also very improbable, and that for me, I can immediately say, no, I don't want to invest in that. That's not the card for me, and it makes it very clear. Another example, I just bought a Dustin Martin rookie card for $90. I really didn't think I'd win it for 90, and I was kind of in shock when I did, but I'm pretty happy now that happened. And let's just look what I'd have to sell it for to recoup that money in the long term. So paying $90 now, it would need to hit $200 in year 9, which is 2031, which I think is possible. It's probably on the edge. It's of what I'm comfortable with. I don't think it's going to be that much more expensive than that in 2031, although it has got up to $150 before, so it does have that market price history, which could make it rebound very quickly into the future. And at 375 in year 15, I'm pretty happy with that personally. I think that's a reasonable amount, and that's all that this calculation is. There's no way of predicting the future. There's no way of saying, oh, this card will be X amount of dollars in 15 years. You just can't say that. But what you can do is see if it's reasonable and see if there's market price history that reflects that reasonableness. For my final example, I'm just going to look at sealed boxes because it's something that I've been thinking about, but I think it is a bit harder to justify using this technique. So let's look at 2010 Select Prestige, my favorite box to pick on, and it's going for about $300 right now. So for it to be a good investment at $10% a year, growth a year, then it would have to be $1,250 in 15 years. And we just know how box prices are going at the moment, that this is actually extremely unlikely. I can't name one box that isn't a supremacy or a super high-end recent box that is going for this kind of money. You look at any ones from the 90s and the early 2000s, the highest is probably Hall of Fame, which gets into the many hundreds, probably $500-600, but nothing hits this $1,250. So I'd be very skeptical as to whether it will actually hit this amount. But the thing with sealed boxes for me is because they're more stable, that means the risk is lower, therefore I'm willing to receive a lower return on them. So this is a pretty key financial economic principle. If the risk is higher, then you're going to be demanding a higher reward for that, a higher growth rate. But if the risk is lower, which I think sealed boxes are significantly lower than single cards, then you'd be willing to receive a lower growth rate. So for 5%, you'd need $620 in year 15, and I think this is a shoo-in personally. So I'm very confident in buying those boxes, not for the huge parabolic growth, but for that steady, dependable growth, while also having something you really want in your collection. Okay, so I've just got one more thing to add. It's not going to be another example, it's just going to be making a point on compound interest. And the reason these numbers go up so much is because the 10% growth isn't on the original price. It's not just doing this every time, it's doing the 10% growth on the amount that has already grown. So this is called compound interest, and it makes things grow much faster than if you're just doing straight line simple interest. For an example, I'm just going to do simple interest instead. So 10% growth on $300 is $30. So let's just go this plus $30. So every time instead of growing by 10%, you're just going to be adding $30. So instead of $1,250, let's make sure everything's right. Yep, looks good. You'll be looking at $750 instead. And this is another important thing to take into account when you're trying to price things, because you can't just be saying, oh, it's $300, that means that only has to go up $30 a year. You have to account for the compound growth and the opportunity cost you're losing, because you could be investing that, like I said, into stocks or real estate or crypto or whatever you might be into. So the main takeaway from that, from a technical standpoint, is that there is a time value to money. $1 today is not the same as $1 in the future. And the present value of something is simply the cash flows you're going to get in the future discounted by your growth rate. And I know I concentrated on the 10% today, but it's great to look at all of them. The 10% should be a stretch target, because it is a bit ambitious to grow 10% year on year, but the 5 should be a lot safer and a very reasonable number to get to. The 8 should be somewhere in the middle, and then the 10 should be a stretch target. But in a practical sense, how to use this? Well, you pick a card. I'm going to pick the Dustin Martin TPS right now. In 10, 15 years, I think that's going to be a $2,500 card. I think it's going to be $2,500. So using my judgment, I've picked a number where I think it's going to be in the future, and now I can work backwards. And with my spreadsheet, I can work out that to get to 2,500 with a 10% growth rate year on year, I have to buy the card at $600. And to get there at 8% a year, I have to buy it at $800. So that means I'm looking at buying it somewhere in the middle. So at the moment, I'd be hoping to pay $700 for that card. So that's the practical application. For your information, right now the card's going for about $950. At 10% year on year, it would have to be $4,000 in the future for that to be a justified buy. So that makes it really difficult for me. But that's all I've got for today, and thanks for listening. See you next video. Cheers.